Welcome to Intelligent Think, the podcast in which we explore what makes ideas great, how we can make our thinking better, and why it's so important to share your ideas with the world. Plus, we'll talk to thought leaders and authors about their own ideas and experiences so you can mine them for gold nuggets that will help you on your own journey. I'm Verity Craft.
And I'm Christina Wedgwood.
And this is Intelligent Think. And today we are continuing our AI discussion. So Elsa and Dave, do you want to grab your voices out so everyone knows who's talking again?
Hi, it's Elsa. I'm back again.
And I'm still Dave Taylor.
Generally, Dave's the obvious one.
Yeah.
And actually, Dave and Elsa are both the obvious ones because they're like our one guy and our American. It's the rest of us. So last time on Intelligent Think, we started having a bit of a discussion around AI, and we wanted to give people kind of an insight into how we approach a topic when we're trying to come up with like what's the Intelligent Think belief or principle or basically our rules for use, I suppose, in some ways. And so we chatted a lot about kind of at each stage of the writing process or at each stage of the book process, where should you and shouldn't be using AI? And where we kind of landed on is that if a task relies on kind of your thinking or your creativity, it really needs a human. So, deciding on your book strategy up front, deciding on your topic, those should be coming from you and your ideas. Planning out your chapters and argument in the reader journey, that's really important that it comes from you and your knowledge of your audience. Ugly drafting and fact checking, always important with AI. But there were some places that we saw it could be used, like competitor analysis, market research, taking content that you've already got and figuring out where it fits within your plan, potentially some referencing as well. So that was where we landed last time. But full disclosure, although if you're listening to this, you might be listening to this together. It's been a while since we had that discussion. It's probably been about a month because, let's be honest, we forgot to put a time in the calendar at the end of that one. So how's everyone feeling? Like we've been sitting with that discussion for a little while. How are we feeling about AI a month or so on?
I definitely feel like AI has only become more relevant. I feel like every other conversation I'm having, somehow it sneaks in, inside this circle and with our clients, but also outside as well. Like constantly I'm getting people asking me, I'm back home visiting in the States right now and say, oh, what do you do? The first question people say is, oh, so is AI really changing that? And so I think it's really what's been really present to me recently is that even outside this industry, even outside the writing realm and content realm, people are seeing its effects and noticing it everywhere and having opinions about it. And I think that's just a reflection one more time. And every time I give an answer of, yeah, it's here and we're trying to navigate it, every time I'm finding I give a different answer. So I think it's just evolving so quickly that it's almost hard to say what have I changed today? Because I think it'll be different even tomorrow.
Yeah, like stances could change at any moment. I also feel like oh, okay. I was going to say, I also feel as though we're starting to see a little bit more pushback. Like I think the first little while when AI was out and everyone was just going, if you don't pick up AI, your business is going to fail. If you don't live up to this, then, you're not going to ever be able to succeed. Basically, get on the AI train or fail completely. And I think there's a bit of pushback to that. I'm starting to see a lot more people being like, I don't want to use AI. I don't want to read AI content. I don't want to engage with it in any way. I want to talk to humans. I want to, learn from humans. And so I feel as though we are starting to see already a little bit of pushback there as well.
That's what I was going to say. I think the shine is coming off it a little already, in terms of it being the promised land, and people are engaging with it more and not necessarily liking the experience. So
I think as well,
balance.
In my experience, it's sort of reached a natural limit for what most people want to put into it. You can get some really interesting outputs, and there are some really intriguing like AI artwork forums, but people are kind of like, well, you produced a really good prompt. where you're very specific about exactly what you wanted. And that's really helpful in terms of if we were writing a writing prompt to brief out a bit of content. You'd need to be very, very specific and detailed as to what to get. But realistically, most people don't want that. What they want is to be understood, but they don't always have the words to articulate that or to kind of prompt a writer for it. That comes from things like the conversations, really kind of teasing out the ideas. So I think people are kind of going, oh, it's not really worth the effort to do it that way. I'll get the proper artists to do it, I'll call them.
That's my hope.
That really reminds me of something I've been noticing recently. This question keeps coming up for me of, sometimes we'll see clearly AI written content come our way from other people. And I always think, I'm like, how does this person think that this is good enough? Like, how do they not see how sort of vapid this text is? There's no substance here. How do they not see it? And so I've been musing on that quite a bit. And I think what I've started to realize is when you're the person briefing AI, it is so, so hard to be a step back from it. Because when you go to AI, and I've tried this myself, I'm in a space where I'm really annoyed with my own brain. I'm like, just organize yourself, make sense of this, or just do this piece of work that I'm, beating my head against the wall for. And when it comes back, first of all, chat loves to tell you how smart and amazing you are. So you get this surge of like, yes.
You feel validated.
Great for the sycophants,
And then it gives you something really pretty and quite organized. And so you in your head, you've been thinking about this topic so much, you're so aware of what you want it to say. And then it comes out and it's in this full, beautiful form. And you go, yes, this is perfect. It's done it. But you don't actually read it word for word. You're not reading what it says. You're thinking about what you want and then seeing these lovely constructed words. And I think there's something that happens. I've sometimes experimented with generating content and I'm like, oh, this is pretty good. And then I come back a day later and I'm like, Elsa, this is terrible. Like, how did you think this was good yesterday? And I think there's some psychological thing when you use it. It's really hard to be a third party and eagle eye on your own conversation with these tools.
You've been on this emotional journey with it probably because there was some kind of frustration or fear or sense of shortcoming or whatever that's driven you to use it in the first place. You often, I guess, if you're in your example, Elsa, of my brain's like at the end of its rope and can't thread these threads anymore. And then, it's hit all your happy chemicals when it served you up an answer. And so you're right, like your objectivity has just like left the building.
Which is interesting because we often say like you can't edit your own work or it's really hard to edit your own work. It's one of the reasons why we appreciate having a team, because even as very good writers, we all make mistakes. We all write things that you go back and you're like, what does that mean? And so
that you can't even see because like Elsa said, you're projecting. You're not even reading the words properly. You're projecting what you think's there.
Yeah, exactly. And so, everything in intelligent ink goes through at least 2 sets of eyes. Whenever we are, working on a book, there are probably 3, 2 or 4 potentially sometimes, of us working on that book so that it gets all of those different sets of eyes. And I would have thought prior to all of this that actually, you would be the second set of eyes over the AI content. But actually, I think because you are feeding it the brief and it's so immediately giving you back something, it's really hard to create that distance. Whereas like if you're working with a copywriter or a ghostwriter, if one of our clients is working with us, yes, we're going to ask them lots of questions. We're going to have a discussion with them. We're going to talk about it all and get that all out of their brain. And then but when we go away and write something, when it's coming back to them, it's quite fresh because they haven't had that discussion literally 10 seconds ago. And so they can look at it with a lot more distance than if, they are literally feeding it into AI. And I think that's really interesting because it's not necessarily something I would have thought before all of this, but it is like we've all experienced that. We've put stuff in and gotten it out and been like, oh, that looks great, and then go back to it later and go, well, that's shit.
Maybe you need some time. Maybe that's the key that we're picking up here, is that you need a little bit of time to elapse so that your critical brain comes back online. And it's a little bit like my husband when he was writing his book. He used to drink beer and write stuff in the evening, and then he'd edit it in the morning. Like, and in his merry evening state, he'd think he was on this really great roll with things. And sometimes that tracked by the morning, but other times he'd look at it in the morning and be like, what the?
Isn't Ernest Hemingway? It's Ernest Hemingway. It's a right drunk and sober. Terrible advice.
It wasn't quite.
Could I have a beer? And I go, oh,
it wasn't quite as extreme as that with Logan, but he did, you do get into your own sort of little bubble with it. And then I think you and I do that. Dave, we've talked about that in the writing process anyway. You get really deep in, and then you like pull yourself out and go, what? But it's time and distance that lets you see things properly.
Here's what I would challenge around this. We've been having this conversation around books, or I guess arguably longer blogs and articles, because that's our bread and butter. That's what we love to do. But if you're going through a chat tool, a large language model tool, realistically, we're talking about the likes of ChatGPT, because it's say free and ubiquitous. If it's just like, cool, write me a post, bam, done. Having a long time span isn't benefiting you. It's not even of your concern. And I wonder if that's where it will continue to find its home, is in the shorter ephemeral content, where it is post it gets the likes, you move on really, really quickly. Whether it will evolve and be able to handle larger bodies of text remains to be seen. But I think almost its short-termedness suits its purpose really, really well. It's just that purpose isn't, certainly in our experience, writing books.
It's certainly far better at writing short form content than it is at writing long form, partially because there are character limits. So it can't remember like a whole book. It can't create a whole book in one go. It has to create it in pieces, and therefore those pieces don't necessarily naturally flow. I would say, and this kind of comes back to what I was saying around there's starting to be some backlash, that again, there's a difference between something that reads pretty well and sounds okay and something that's actually a good piece of content. Because like that is what we're seeing, is there is so much AI drivel now on LinkedIn that basically everyone is complaining about it, because they're like, I don't want to see it. I want to go back to seeing thoughtful content from people who have something to say and are saying it in their own authentic way. And they're like, and I'm sick of seeing AI drivel. And I'm sure some of it works really well, but there's a lot that does not. So I think it's, again, like it's better at the short form than books, but I don't certainly think that it's necessarily feeding up anything that's like actually mega effective.
I've got a question.
Great.
What makes a good piece of writing?
Oh God, I feel like we've tried to answer this so many times and can never exactly answer it.
I have a short anecdote.
Ooh.
So my dad the other day was talking about, he used to chef. That was his first job out of college. And the chef used to say, make sure you leave lumps in your potatoes. So they used to do mashed potatoes. And he said, if you whip them too much, people will think they're instant. And I think there's something to learn from that. A piece of AI writing is perfect. And even if you write it yourself, sometimes there's this sense of, oh, is this a human? Is this real? Is it not real? Are you eating real potatoes that have been whipped perfectly, almost too perfectly? Or are you eating instant potatoes? And I don't want anything to do with that. And so the question for me was, well, are we supposed to leave lumps in the potatoes now? Like, better than that? And what I actually think it is it's not about the imperfections, but it's about showing the process that you took to get there. And I think that might be the key to really good content, is showing the journey a little bit more, showing like what we're doing here. We're not polishing this perfect podcast. We're having a raw, authentic conversation.
What are you talking about, Elsa? Surely this is perfect and polished.
You didn't get the script in earlier?
Oh no, I'm off topic. But I think and that is such a huge part of thought leadership, is showing, I'm not sure about this, or I have this question, or is it this, or is it this? Like the content itself, I think the lumps are the question around it. It's the journey to get to the solution, instead of just presenting these perfect things in perfect format every time.
It kind of comes back to just to quote a really good book that somebody wrote. It's called Better, More Authentic Path for the Reluctant Thought Leader. So Christina, in your book, it's your 4 principles. Like, it's all of those things that you talk about. It's embracing uncertainty, embracing complexity. You can tell me the other 2, because now I'm blanking.
It is. It's complexity. It's not being okay, not knowing. It's enrolling other people, like engaging them in the process, and it's evolving. It's showing the journey that you've gone on, the workings. If you took someone into the kitchen, Elsa, and you made them sit there and watch you make your potatoes, you could serve them up the most perfectly whipped ones, and they wouldn't second guess that, because they saw you make them, which is kind of what you're saying there. Show your work. But you're not going to drag everybody back into the kitchen so that they can witness real potatoes being made perfectly. You can do that here. And I think I was smiling, but even before you said it, that you were going to quote that, but I was smiling because I was like, like, this is already the whole point of that book was that the sort of, I've been skeptical always of the pithy, too perfect, soundbitey, like answers. And no, I don't think we need more of that.
No, for sure. So last time when we chatted, we kind of went through each stage of the writing or the book process, and we got up to pretty much the point that we get clients up to. So we'd started talking a bit about editing. I don't actually think we finished it, and I'd love us to start there and then maybe talk a bit about what are the other stages of the book process, knowing that, they're not the ones that we are specialists in. We are specialists at helping people create incredible manuscripts, so getting up to the point where they're published already. But I still think it's really important, people are thinking about the publishing, the marketing, how they're going to leverage their book before they even start writing it often, or at least they probably should be, certainly on the marketing side of things. And so I think it would be really interesting for us to talk about, it might not be that we have, yes, you must do this and you must not do this, but it might be, well, these are some cool ways that we've seen people use it, or some ways we've seen people use it that they shouldn't have been using it for each of those stages. So before we dive into the stages that we don't work on, we started talking about editing. And I thought that would be a really interesting one, because I actually think we've had a couple of people that we've talked to recently that we've started working on their books, who have kind of tried to use AI as a bit of a thinking editing partner, not always to the best result. And I wondered, Elsa, maybe whether you could speak to that. Obviously, we're not going to use any names, but like around how you found that process of seeing what came out of them doing that.
Yeah. So interestingly about this, we had a client recently give our book over, and one of the things we noticed immediately was that it didn't quite flow together. It didn't feel like a singular book. And I think what had happened is, because there were so many ideas and pieces to it, AI would run with each piece at one time and then would spit out sort of this, the idea was there, but it was like all the middle of a sandwich without the bread. And you're like, what's the context of this? Where are we starting from? Who is this again? Back up a little bit, and then it would finish before you really felt satisfied. And all of these were sort of bunched together, one right after another. And, we looked at it and we're like, where are the chapters? Where's the journey? What is this, what are you taking your reader on? There was no sort of guidance. It was like a museum with just the stuff there and no tour guide to say, here's how all of this fits together. And I think that the thinking partner element of it, I think it was probably helpful for coming up with the ideas and these particular, short, pithy, here's how I get this idea into this succinct sort of section of a chapter, but really bad at thinking big picture and linking together those details with what they actually wanted to do long term throughout the course of the whole book. On the total other end of the spectrum, I experimented with using AI to help consolidate some notes. We had notes from a few people on the same meeting. We had a transcript of the meeting, and I said, oh, there's so much here. I wonder if I could shortcut the process of just getting all of them organized, as opposed to manually going through and putting this note about this topic over here. And it did an okay job of that. And as I was doing that and editing it, I started to see the flow of chapters together in those notes. And so I think that might be the sort of other side of the coin of, yes, we were on the right track. AI could be helpful here, but not at the let's write the text and actually plan out each section piece, but more how can we consolidate all of this massive data set or this massive amount of information that we're starting with. So that was a very long, drawn out thinking, but what do you guys think?
Well, in terms of sort of consolidating editing, I find it really helpful to take a interview transcript and I'll ask it to tidy up the language. So it removes the ums, the ahs, the double ups when someone will half start a sentence and then start a second sentence and it just gets a little bit messy. Really, really good for that same sort of thing. It's just like, can you give me a cleaned up version of what they have said? And then you ask it, maybe to produce some bullet points of some of the main topics. It's quite good. But you still have to bring so much of yourself to the party in order to make it make sense. Or I guess probably not helped by the fact that certainly, I can't speak for everyone, but writing a book is a non-linear process. Certainly for me, one of the things I find myself increasingly saying is, you write your introduction last because you have to set the promise. But if you went in writing your introduction at the very first thing you did, yeah, sure, I guess you'd set yourself up for what's to follow, but that only works if you know what's going to follow. So you kind of have to do it. And I guess in the case of, you need those layers of bread on that sandwich, maybe the trick around that would be to get all your filling and then find your bread. But I don't know if it's going to be worth the energy trying to grow the wheat at this stage.
I think the key here is that in the editing stage, like in virtually anything else, it can be another set of eyes, right? Like you could put your full manuscript through and go, tell me if there's anything that you think doesn't make sense. Are there any gaps? Are there any opportunities for better stories? Are there, do you see, maybe check the spelling and punctuation, tools like Grammarly now, I assume probably have AI built into them because, which tools don't?
According to the number of ads that I get for that, yes.
So I think it's remembering that it's not always the best at getting that big picture overview, figuring out the flow, actually reading it from a human perspective to go, would I want to read this as a reader? Like that's the thing that it can't do. So in terms of the editing stages, that you can use it as an extra set of eyes, but you still need humans to actually read it and go, is this something that I would want to buy a copy of, that I'd want to have on my bedside table and ignore for 2 months until I finally read it? Is this a book worth reading? AI can't tell you that because it's not a human who actually is going to pick it up and choose to read it.
And as we know, increasingly it's also surprisingly sycophantic.
Yeah.
It will tell you, oh, I love this book. I love what you've done here. It's like, it doesn't quite have the chutzpah or the moxie to go like, no, but here's what we can do differently.
So it's not going to challenge you. Is it not going to challenge you sufficiently, you think, that?
I suspect not, unless perhaps you go into it with that conversation. This kind of brings back to an earlier point, which is I think that when you go into using a tool like that, you sort of assume it will make the same assumptions as if you're talking to a person. And go, I just want you to get it. I just, I want to go, write me a blog about this. What I don't want to have to do is go, this is the subtext and this is the connections and I do this and then this links over to that kind of metaphor here and you know what I mean, right? You sort of just go, no, I want you to get it. It can't do that because it doesn't have a direct line into our heads, but conversationally, we pick up on the stuff because that is what humans are pretty good at doing, which is reading those signals. It's
like making connections with lots of other things, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Without having to be told to make that connection.
Yeah, and then also bring something of itself to that conversation. When I ask the question of what makes good writing, it's sort of the same question as that. It's really, really hard to answer that question. I have my current working, is when there is unity of sense, sound, rhythm, and meaning, and that they're all pushing in the same direction. If you want to judge good poetry, to me, sense, sound, rhythm, and meaning all go in the same direction. Rhyming is not in there for good reason. But you sort of have that with a good book. There is this sort of cohesion to it. There's something that all these elements work together. There's some great ideas working there as well. But the language model can't assess that. It just doesn't have the tools when it's been trained on just text.
Yeah.
I was one of the bits of reading I was doing recently was about the 55% of language is non-verbal, only 7% comes through your words. It's only got the 7% to work with. That is its everything, and that's all it can give you, is where I see it now. Maybe in another 5 years or 10 years, I may be surprised, but it hasn't got 55% of the non-verbal stuff. Doesn't get tone and inflection, although there are some pretty good tone and inflection analysis features.
Which is an interesting thing, because obviously when you're reading a book, unless you're listening to the audiobook, you too are only reading the words. But I think that as humans, when we read something, we read tone into it. Like when I'm reading something, I can generally hear it in my head. So, like you can tell when someone is trying to get sarcasm across, or you can tell when somebody is, making a joke. You can tell when somebody is, hopefully you can tell. If it's well written, you can tell. Whereas, I don't know if to be able to judge that so much. Not that I've tested that out particularly.
No, it's a really good point. I mean, there are some people who don't have that visual center, for instance, or they don't have that center. They can't imagine a red apple. They just don't have.
I've seen that recently.
Right, you don't. But then those people may not necessarily be as attracted to reading. They may not find it as fulfilling. They may not also. I don't know how to say this without sounding incredibly snobby. They may not know the difference between a good and a bad bit of writing.
I mean, Dave, when is sounding snobby ever stopped you before?
Nearly make me spill my pink gin. No, it's a sense, I suppose, of I've read Twilight. I've read the first 2 books on a bet, I'll point out, and I don't think that they're very well written. But you read something like I don't know, looking at the shelf next to me, Stephen King, or Vladimir Nabokov, and you go, yeah, this is good writing, right? This is great writing. But what separates them, and would it matter?
Well,
because people read some trashy books. I read some trashy books.
I read a lot of trashy books, man. My Goodreads is kind of embarrassing if you think let's look at what somebody in the book world reads, and it's 90% just trashy.
Rom-com.
That's sort of also why not? Does it matter?
No,
I guess
exactly.
I'm kind of going with that. Does it matter? And I guess it has to matter to a certain extent for us as writers, that we probably don't want to write trash or slop, as they refer to AI now. But if it passes a test for 50% of people, 100% of people, well, obviously not 100%, if it passes a test for 50% of people or 60 or 70%, it's probably not an issue. But again, that probably comes back to why it suits short form, where there's fewer points to measure it against.
And what the purpose is. So, if you're writing a book with us, those are the kind of books that we know about. You're doing it to build thought leadership, which means you are doing it to demonstrate your expertise, your ideas. Like you have a particular point of view that you're trying to get out into the world in order to have some kind of impact. So it should reflect you. That's what it comes down to. It should be you. It shouldn't be. And that's not to say that you can't use AI in some ways. It's not to say, we do ghostwriting for people. We write on people's behalf, but it should still reflect you. And until the tools can do that, that's where you've got to be a bit wary, I think.
I feel like I wrote this in a blog recently for us, where it's like, yeah, absolutely, you can do it on the cheap and you can do it with AI. Yeah, for sure. But that's not what we value. And therefore, our position, as varied as it is what you've been listening to.
Yeah. So before we finish up, I do want to kind of close the loop on the other stages of the book journey. And I don't think that we need to come up with here is where it should always be used and where it shouldn't for publishing and marketing and leverage, because frankly, those aren't the pieces that we're expert in. But I do wonder whether you guys have seen any examples of where you have seen it being used really well, or where you think it could be used really well, or the opposite, where it hasn't worked in those kind of areas. So once the manuscript's done.
I think around the publishing to marketing phase, getting some help around like almost your to-do checklist or a project plan and a timeline. That part of the book, especially compared to writing, where it's all focused on just manuscript, it's so bitsy. There's so many little things, and you can do all of them. You can do none of them or 50%. And so I think it's really hard to know. I think everybody has the sense of what are we missing here? What am I not doing, or what could I be doing? And I think AI could be really helpful for even just getting a rough idea of what should I be doing 3 months out from launch. Give me some ideas for posts. What should I be announcing? Who should I be reaching out to? What does a press release look like? All of these little elements that most of our authors have never had to think about or put together before. And there are resources for that out there as well. But to have that tailored to your audience, your area of the world, how you're publishing, I think AI could be really helpful for some of that almost project planning side of things.
But on that same sort of note regarding things like marketing, for someone who really enjoys the long form stuff but doesn't like the short form material, they certainly could, but should they use AI for generating some posts?
I think the place where it's particularly valuable is actually taking your book content and turning that into lots of short form posts, because then you can say things to it like, use my own words and phrases, like, structure it differently so that it, becomes a LinkedIn post, becomes an Instagram post, but, make sure it still sounds like me and a book. And because you're giving it so much, it can do that because it's got this massive example to work off rather than pulling from other places. So I actually think that's a really valuable place to use AI, is to go, I've got all of this content, could be anywhere from 30 to 70,000 words. Now give me something that's going to be valuable on my other platforms that still sounds like me, because you're still the one that's fed it all the content and all of the ideas. I think actually that's a really valuable place to use it.
Agreed.
I think the other piece on the publishing part is actually doing some research. So if you are going to use a hybrid publisher, if you are going to self-publish and you want to use people, obviously, if you're working with us or know us, you can come to us and ask for our recommendations. But if you don't, if people didn't know, then they could use that to go, all right, give me all of the different, publishing houses that are taking submissions, or give me all of the publishing houses that, publishing agencies that I pay to do it, and break down, by these criteria, who's best for this. And so you can start to compare, because it can be really hard to judge, like, which one is actually right for me, how much is it going to cost, all that sort of stuff. And so rather than having to go through every single website, you can get it to do a lot of the legwork for you. You do still have to fact check. I feel like that's my my proviso with all
party line in general.
Yeah, just everywhere in neon letters.
Don't trust
AI.
Don't trust the thing. I remember I'm probably not meant to name him, but I could, and it would be fine, I'm sure. But remember, one of our authors came to us, Verity, with like just pages and pages of, I'm not saying that he used AI because I don't know that he did, but pages and pages of ideas of launch activities that he was going to do. I think he'd done a lot of research, AI assisted or not, don't know, doesn't actually matter for this example, but he had all of this, all of these possibilities and all of these ideas of, I think lots of the time when people know that you're writing or about to launch a book, you get pitched and approached by lots of people too. So, however you've generated that, he had a lot of ideas and then came to us for the strategy piece to help him discern, which ones of these are worth investing in. If I've got finite time to work on this launch and also finite money that I'm going to put into paying for various services, what gives me the best option. So I think if his research was generated by AI, say you did and you could do that, to your point of using it to look around and help you figure out what's possible, I think that was a really good example of where it could help, and then the bit that you still bring some human thinking and brain to.
Well,
because
still need...
we could back up and zoom out with him and go, here's what you're ultimately trying to achieve, and then it became really clear which of those things were going to further his objectives and which weren't.
Yeah, I think that's the really key bit is, in that example and in lots of examples, it's AI or any kind of, Google search is probably going to give you ideas for marketing your book. And those are going to be really, really helpful. However, if your purpose is not actually, I want to sell 3,000 copies of my book, if your goal with writing the book is, I want to grow my business or I want to increase my impact, that's going to define what you should and shouldn't be focusing your energy on in a really different way. Like, actually, if your focus is, I want to grow my business, then actually, it might not be about, I want to sell 10,000 copies. It might be, I want to get copies in front of these 100 people who are the most
all these conference organizers are
exactly
speaking gigs, but
exactly. Or like one of our clients, Dr. Ellen Joan Ford, so it's about impact. She wants as many people to read her book Work School Hours as possible, and so she's actually decided she now gives away her ebook for free at the end of her speaking gigs. She has a little QR code that people can download, because for her, it's not about selling lots of copies of the books. Obviously, that would be nice, but it's about getting as many people to read it and hopefully implement it as possible. And so that then again is a really different decision. So I think you need to use your brain for the strategy piece, get really, really clear on why am I writing this book? What am I trying to drive to? What's important to me? What's the end result that I want? And then you can use AI and things like that for ideas for how to get there. What are the tactics? What are the things? Because then you've got that lens that you can use to judge those tactics by. Cool. Is there anything else that is on your guys' minds around AI, the way that we use it, where we've landed? I think Elsa summed it up really nicely in an email that we sent out to our database of, if a task relies on thinking or creativity, it needs a human. If a task relies on organizing information, it might be an opportunity to speed up things with AI. Anything to add to that? Or, are we all just... preaching to the choir here? We're probably all a lot more aligned than maybe everyone would be.
I believe they call this dead air.
I mean, I'll just edit it out, Dave.
And I'm on mute because my little fellow has decided that now's a good time to play ukulele.
So we get some outro music from both.
Oh goodness.
Okay, well, thank you guys for bringing your brains to this discussion. Obviously, this all contributes to how Intelligent Inc. approaches AI, talks about AI. People are asking all the time how we're affected by AI and what we think of it when it comes to book writing. So this was kind of our chance to figure it out for ourselves, but also share that via the podcast for our listeners, whoever you are, to, hear how we approach ideas, how we approach discussion topics. And it might spark something for you too. So if it has sparked anything, feel free to flick us a message, pop a comment on whatever posts we put out on LinkedIn and things about this, because we'd love to hear how you would approach it as well. So you have been listening to Intelligent Think with Verity Craft and Christina Wedgwood, brought to you by Intelligent Inc. Thank you to Jeff Ong for our theme music and to you for listening. And also thanks to Dave and Elsa for joining us today. I can put that in my little outro, but we should. Don't forget to subscribe, share with your friends, and give us a review. Here's to better thinking together.